All right, let's continue the reactions to that meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and his U.S. counterpart, Donald Trump. And in studio, we are still joined by former Ambassador Lindy Wezulu. But in this capacity, we are going to talk to her as a senior ANC member, because we're joined by other political party representative, and Emma Powell is the Democratic Alliance spokesperson on international relations matters. To both of you, good evening, and thank you very much for your time. Let me start, Emma Powell, with you. Your reaction to what played out at the White House tonight. Let's start there.
Well, it was a deeply uncomfortable, but I think necessary engagement. And for me, what mattered most is that it highlighted the unity of South Africans in moments of pressure, but whilst exploring some of the most pressing challenges in our country that indeed do need to be ventilated. I don't think that anybody could have expected that in the Oval Office, such a horrendous video of our anti-constitutionalist, anarchist colleagues in Parliament singing "Shoot the Boer" would have been screened along with the scenes of the burial sites of white farmers. It was certainly a shock and unexpected. And once again, it was President Cyril Ramaphosa's charm offensive that was his most valuable asset in that moment of pressure. But for me, it was in fact the DA leader, John Steenhuisen's powerful rebuke of the EFF and the MK that in fact turned the tide at a moment where the conversation could have gone south very quickly. And by Minister Steenhuisen having explained precisely why the GNU is so necessary, he highlighted the urgency of the formation of the Government of National Unity in order to keep those very anti-constitutionalists and anarchists at bay. I think it was also very smart of President Ramaphosa and both Mr. Elson and Rupert, who pivoted to making a request of President Donald Trump and his government to in fact partner with South Africa in helping us to solve some of the pressing crime challenges that had been highlighted. For example, by assisting us with the use of US drones and technology to deal with this criminality. So I think that whilst we've now seen the scrum in the Oval Office, the media scrum, I think that behind closed doors, those conversations will mature into level-headed conversations about how to take the relationship forward from here. And I'm sure that there will be discussions around the potential for a strategic investment framework as a precursor or a sort of an on-ramp to a broader formal bilateral trade agreement between our two countries that will safeguard jobs and growth.
Yeah. Emma Naledi here also with Newzroom Afrika. Just as we expand the conversation, we continue to analyze the role that was played by John Steenhuisen in the discussion. Do you feel that he did a good enough job in dispelling the issue around farm attacks? I mean, one of the things that he talked about is that he's also there to start putting pressure on the government to make farm attacks a priority crime. Did that help in dispelling some of the perceptions around a white genocide in South Africa?
Well, you heard from the clip that's just been played that whilst Minister Steenhuisen highlighted the abhorrent and urgent nature of farm murders in South Africa as indeed needing to be classified as a priority crime with a rural safety plan that addresses this urgent crisis. He also spoke about how it is small-scale farmers, many of them black farmers, who are also suffering disproportionately from what is a broader crime problem. So two things can be true at the same time. We can acknowledge the abhorrent, urgent nature of farm violence in this country, but at the same time, we do not need to racialize that crisis. We know that we have a problem. We know that we need a solution. And Minister Steenhuisen said in that clip that as the Minister of Agriculture responsible for farmers, he is indeed working with Justice and Security Cluster ministers to address address the plan. And then, of course, from a party political perspective, the DA has invested significant resources into developing a targeted, evidence-based, innovative rural safety plan that will indeed, from within government, help us to finally address the abhorrent nature of this crime that the people who put food on the table of ordinary South Africans have to navigate every day.
Let's bring into the conversation Linde Wezulu, ANC NEC member, on this same issue, because it is clearly dominant, and I think it is going to continue being dominant until a different story comes out of the private meeting now that is taking place. And so let me go back to some of what President Trump had to say, and that is that generally white farmers are fleeing South Africa. These are his words. And he says, we have many people showing interests. And at some point, he actually even mentions Australia, saying that they are not only running to the US, but they're also going to Australia. Do you believe that this narrative, now that our Team South Africa is in Washington, do you think they can help turn the narrative around?
It is our responsibility, basically, both as the African National Congress and the government of South Africa, to consistently find ways and means of killing, if I may use that word, narratives that actually are not assisting us. It is our responsibility to be very calm about it and rise above. You know, you have to rise above even being angry over something that you know is not true. But you've got to be able to take a step back and say, this is how we are viewed, this is how we are looked at. What is it that we can be able to do to really show for real that this narrative isn't true? And the fact that the president had to lead a delegation that was beyond the government of national unity, including bringing people who have got the capacity and capability of explaining it even outside of being in government.
Yeah.
I think it was the best thing for us to do. This narrative, unfortunately for us, might hang around for a very long time because it seems to be convenient for some people. And those who feel convenient about continuing with it, no matter how much we keep on repeating that it is not true, it remains our responsibility, both as government and the African National Congress, to occupy every available space outside of South Africa, because the people are looking at the United States and what President Trump is saying. Not only is it ourselves who was here, there are others in Europe and in other places who are looking and saying, is this true or not? Our responsibility is to ensure that the whole wide world understands the issue of crime, which is affecting everybody, and everybody is explaining that. Yeah. And looking forward to the engagement at G20 level, I think this is an opportune moment for South Africa because President Trump comes at a time when we have the chairship of G20 and we will have to hand over. So whatever they're saying, we've got a platform to use to showcase ourselves that we are a country with a constitution and a respect for the constitution. Never mind those who are using words against our own and saying they are anti-constitutional, whatever. That's not the issue right here. The issue is that we have a delegation that is in the United States of America. They will come back because whether we like it or not, the issues that were raised there, they do need us as a united country to confront those issues and not be insulting each other, but say to ourselves, what is our national interest? How do we even bring along of our own? I'm talking about South Africans. How do we bring all the others into the fold to say there are certain things that are not sitting very well with people who we need? How do we deal with it?
Yeah, I think the true test, obviously, of whether or not South Africa was successful in this meeting will be seen by how the Trump administration then comes out and reports on these discussions. But I'm also quite keen to find a little bit of what you find of where in that meeting, moments that you thought, well, these are the points that were put on the table by South Africa that were great opportunities to bring the two countries together. I specifically think about Johan Rupert, a businessman, speaking and talking about how, like America, we also have a big problem of illegal immigration. Just some of those moments that you think were really good at bringing the two countries together.
Well, I think that indeed, Johan Rupert talking about, of course, crime being an issue across the board, and then how Starlink could potentially help us solve that, so creating a potential partnership there. And I think that that was incredibly important. I think that at the end, President Ramaphosa having raised the issue of the G20 was incredibly valuable because it put the issue on the table, and it looks now as if we might see greater cooperation between the US and South Africa in regards to the G20. So building of the bridges in that regard. I think that the United States has in many ways done South Africa a favor here, because what they've done is they've really brought to the fore some of our most pressing issues that have long gone unaddressed and unacknowledged by previous governments. And so, for example, we were able to see our leaders and our president highlight the issue of unemployment. And of course, that is linked directly to US-South Africa relations and the over 100,000 jobs that AGOA creates. You know, for example, the 76 billion rands worth of South African exports that go to the US and that create job-rich supply chains, for example, in the automotive sector. So we saw Ramaphosa admitting an issue with unemployment, admitting that there was a crime problem, and then making offers to the United States instead of denying the allegations that have been coming at us through a raft of executive orders since January. Instead of denying them, which would have just angered President Trump, he admitted them publicly on the world stage, and he asked for partnership with the United States in terms of addressing some of these. So I think that demonstrated great maturity on the part of the South African leaders that were present in that room. And I think that Donald Trump also demonstrated great restraint. He's clearly deeply concerned about these issues. I mean, it's unprecedented in the Oval Office for a video of that nature to have been shown. And I really do believe that whilst that meeting was heated and there were moments that it could have descended into a sort of Zelensky-type engagement, the maturity of the leaders in that room demonstrated that there is an enduring willingness on the part of both governments to identify and to fix the issues. Yeah. What's going to matter most now is whether or not President Ramaphosa and the Government of National Unity are able to deliver some quick wins. Starlink and an equity equivalent in that regard would be really a big win. Potentially some kind of very expedited strategic trade and investment framework. So we're going to have to see tangible action in the next coming weeks to prevent, I think, further antagonism from the US. But I think this is a fantastic starting point, and we really couldn't have asked for the meeting to have gone better, as difficult as it was at times.
Emma Paul Oli here. 2 quick points. The Lindiwe Zulu from the African National Congress talks about how, as Team South Africa, we have got to pull together and not to be seen to be divided, even here in the country, on the back of this meeting. And in a way, she also referred to your comments now about the EFF being anti-constitutionalists. And so that's one point. The second one, do you feel that perhaps the crime issue may have been overplayed, even by our team, at the expense, perhaps, of people that come to South Africa as tourists? Do you not fear that that could also turn people, potential tourists, away from South Africa, particularly as it regards the Western Cape? Right now, you have the biggest chunk of those tourists that visit the country.
Indeed, and we did hear Johan Rupert's comments in regards to the situation on the Cape Flats. Look, I think that crime is a widespread problem across South Africa. I think 57,000 people being murdered in a country each year is indeed an absolute crisis. I think it's well known throughout the world that there is a crime problem in South Africa, but there are hotspots that tourists are advised to avoid. So no, I don't think that it's going to lead to any negative sort of or negative outcomes or volatility in terms of our tourist market. South Africa has much more to offer. And I think that people know that. Where I am concerned is that the conversation in the Oval Office today did focus on two predominant issues. It focused on the issue of expropriation without compensation and land seizures, which remains a significant issue in this country, which is why the DA has taken that act to court. And it focused on farm murders. What it didn't focus on, and what I would have liked to have seen more of, and I'm sure this will be ventilated in conversations behind closed doors, is a lot of the foreign policy issues that have been highlighted by President Trump and the White House that really go to the heart of when America talks about countries being included in AGOA's preferential market access ambit, that they may not act in a way that is contrary or that threatens U.S. national security interests. Now, fraternization with some of the enemies of the United States, or what we would call their strategic adversaries, remains a concern. And I do hope that behind closed doors, some of those conversations could be had. We were also unable in that conversation to address issues that affect the poorest South Africans, such as, for example, life-saving PEPFAR funding, 8 billion rands worth of PEPFAR funding this year having been summarily terminated, and our government has been unable to so far plug that gap. We were unable to discuss some of the impact of the US aid program suspension. And I think that those are significant issues. So, you know, PEPFAR, US aid, foreign policy, I do believe those will be discussed behind closed doors. What I really do take away from this Oval Office engagement is that there have been some very powerful signals coming out of the White House, executive orders, tweets, social media posts that have caused great potential reputational harm to South Africa, but at the same time have been necessary in order to focus our government's attention on the matters that the global community of democracies is most concerned about. And we now have acknowledgement by our president and by the ministers that were present in that room that these issues are indeed crises. They are receiving attention. They've asked the United States for help. And hopefully that was a foundational building block on which we can finally say we're not going to deny that we have these problems as has been tradition, but rather we're now willing to admit these are crises. How can you help us?
Emma Powell there of the Democratic Alliance, thank you so much for your time. As we continue to get reaction to that meeting in the White House between President Donald Trump as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa and, of course, the team that was flanking them. One of the big moments that's a talking point in that meeting is when Donald Trump signaled for a clip to be played. And that, of course, led to us seeing Julius Malema being referenced, and also audio of him and a video of him as well in a packed stadium that Donald Trump described as full, saying 100,000 people in that stadium. Of course, Donald Trump saying that is not a small party. That is singing Kill the Boer. In a moment, we're going to be hearing from the economic freedom fighters, but we continue to get reaction here in studio to was that whether or not it was a successful meeting. We're also joined now by Wits University international relations expert, Professor Gilbert Kadiagala. Welcome back, Prof. What a busy evening. I think that the one thing that certainly is going to stand out is that particular moment. Talk to me about your immediate thoughts when you heard the voice of Julius Malema. Then there was what some would describe a difficult moment when the singing of Kill the Boer was heard. And we listened to it for a lengthy amount of time, some would argue. Prof?
Going into this meeting, it was expected that the big elephant in the room was going to be the genocide claims. So the U.S. delegation was very prepared, actually, to ambush, I mean, not too badly, but at least to bring up the video as a way to challenge South African claims that, in fact, the U.S. is exaggerating this. So I think that video was dramatic in a way to put up the point that, no, we are not lying. You've been accusing us of lying, but we want to give you actual evidence. And so bringing Malema, I think, as the author of that episode, I think, was quite over-dramatic.
Yeah.
But it was also a way to put it very politely, to put Malema on trial because it was very specific to an EFF narrative about killing the Boer and so on. But for South Africa, for the U.S. delegation, it was very appropriate because they are saying, this is the truth. This is what is happening in your country.
Yeah. Prof, let's pause you there for a moment because we are joined by the EFF. The spokesperson, Snao Tambo, is joining the conversation. Mr. Tambo, good evening to you. And your reaction to clips of the leader of your party being played in the Oval Office?
Look, we think it's a confirmation that the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema, continues to be on the right side of history. So unlike others who are being praised for being charming and being mature in a patronizing manner by Donald Trump and Johan Rupert, the Commander-in-Chief and President of the EFF is being called out for chanting a song called Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, which is directed to a system of oppression where a white minority controls the resources in the land of South Africa, while the black majority continues to be slaves at their behest. So I think it represents a genuine reason for us to be proud of a leader of an organization in South Africa that does not bend on principle. While Cyril Ramaphosa distanced himself from a chant which was developed by the ANC, distanced himself from a chant which was ratified as constitutional freedom of speech that should not be interpreted literally by the Constitutional Court of South Africa, the Commander-in-Chief and President of the Economic Freedom Fighters is being called upon to be arrested by an irrational, illiterate, racist President of the United States of America whose term can not come to an end anytime sooner. So our reaction is that we've caused the necessary shake and debate internationally, and it's something that we should continue to do and not retreat.
Mr. Snao Tambo, Naledi here, thank you so much for your time. You've already had Julius Malema take to Twitter. In fact, if we can bring that up on the screen. This is what Julius Malema tweeted just a moments after that meeting. A group of older men met in Washington to gossip about me. No significant amount of intelligent evidence has been procured about white genocide. We will not agree to compromise our political principles on land expropriation without compensation for political expediency. I wonder, just as you look at the meeting as a whole, and certainly we can get into the debate around Kill the Boer and how that was characterized in that meeting, but what you make about the image that South Africa portrayed itself, and you talk about the inequality, certainly in the race relations that we have here as a country, but there is also the issue of just how much crime was brought up in that meeting. I specifically think about Zingiswa Losi saying that we have so much crime that we are also finding bodies of elderly women that have been, violated and such. That the image that we've portrayed of the country is one that is a good one.
Look, I think the delegation was poor generally. I mean, I can understand where Zingiswa Losi was coming from by trying to counter the narrative that there's a white genocide and that crime disproportionately affects white people. But I don't think it was a good manner and her approach when she tried to portray it by speaking about decapitated elderly people as if that would be a sufficient counter. The counter that the delegation should have brought is data-specific evidence that shows that there is no mass killing or orchestrated state-sanctioned murder of white people in South Africa, because that's what genocide is. And they were unable to unpack the false dichotomy between the white genocide and the singing of a liberation song that courts have declared should not be interpreted literally. So I think they went there to deflect. They were unable to own the decisions of their own courts of law, unable to own a chant that was developed by their own political party, which is the former liberation movement, the African National Congress. And it was a poor showing, but also there was a lot of contradiction between the delegation, which shows you that it was ill-informed. but not developed by Cyril Ramaphosa himself. Earlier this afternoon, Balula said that it was Donald Trump who requested the presence of the likes of Annie Else and Johan Rupert because they were his golfing buddies or something of that nature, along with Gary Player. So it shows you that the delegation that went to represent South Africa, constituted by businessmen and golf players, was not in sync in terms of its appreciation of domestic and international policy and liberation history in South Africa. And they were speaking in contradictory tones. John Steenhuisen speaking about how the government of national unity is a product of trying to keep the EFF out of government. You could see the disjuncture. And it was a poor showing on an international platform, and Donald Trump certainly took advantage of that.
Let's bring the conversation to studio. Lindy Wezulu, how do you respond to the EFF? Because they're quite clear that the delegation failed dismally at countering the false narratives of white genocide in South Africa.
It's very unfortunate, actually, when you have governments anywhere else who would want to divide us as a nation. I start from there. We've got our own internal dynamic politics of EFF, of MK, of DA, and all. But I don't think we should take kindly, actually, when those dynamics are turned around to convince somebody else about something that is not happening in the country. I think that the EFF has got the right to react in the manner in which they reacted, because I don't think any one of us expected to be seeing the kind of clip that was shaped and selected specifically to relate to an issue of mass killing of farmers and all that. I did explain earlier on that this song is not a new song. It's an old song. It is a song that motivated us a lot when we were in the liberation struggle. And I did indicate that that's not a song that we can easily forget. By the way, there's many other songs. Why go and pick specifically on this song? It is relevant for them. But put that aside, because I think what is important here going forward, whether we like it or we don't like it, as South Africans, across the different political parties, when we get that kind of an attack from outside, we need to find each other to represent what the country stands for, irrespective of the fact that we've got the different political parties. By the way, the president did indicate as he was speaking that we've got democracy in South Africa. We've got an institution in South Africa. We've got a constitution that enables the freedom of speech and people being able to express themselves. How you then take that and couch it in a way that it is convenient for your narrative is a different story altogether. So I believe that, by the way, you're talking about the fact that the EFF is saying the delegation was whatever. I think this was a delegation that was very well prepared for a very difficult moment, having seen what happened before, right there in front of our eyes. This delegation went prepared, and this delegation stood for South Africa overall. They will come back, and by the way, when they come back, that will be the opportune moment for us, and me, as us in the African National Congress, we will be able to point out, hey, maybe we didn't like this one. No, why did this one say this? But that's the freedom that we have in South Africa, that they can come back. And the biggest work that we need right now is out of the glare now. They are going to go into different discussions. They are going to discuss the economy. They are going to discuss AGOA. They're going to discuss G20. We are expecting them to firmly stand with each other as a government of national unity. And we expect them to come back home. And by the way, I'm sure Parliament will have its opportune moment. The EFF and everybody will have their opportune moment through asking questions to the president, through writing questions to wherever. They will have their time. What I think is important is for us to say there was a need for that delegation to go to the United States of America. It is about our economy. And when you are a leader of a country, you've got to take that fight to where it's needed. up to its conclusion. And the conclusion would be the reset they spoke about. What are we resetting? We are resetting the current bilateral relations that we have with the United States, taking into consideration President Trump's administration and his approach to us. Because all these things that are being said here about us not having been speaking about the crime and all, for God's sake, we are the ones that have been speaking out about the problem of crime in South Africa. Not today. We started talking about that a long time ago. We have been putting plans in place to address it, but unfortunately for us, we have not reached a place where we can say crime is no longer an issue in South Africa.
You know, in the run-up to this meeting, we had a discussion here on Newzroom Afrika with a reputation expert, Solly Moeng, who made the point that the singing, though, of Kill the Boer does not send the right message. We have the freedom to do so constitutionally, he argues, but it does not send the right message. And perhaps now, Tambo, I'll bring this one to you, because in that meeting, Donald Trump using the words that if anyone were to be heard singing, well, let's go and kill this person, or do go and kill this person, that person would be in jail, going as far as to ask why that man leading that song is not in jail. I mean, what do you say and make of that particular moment and what Donald Trump had to say about the song specifically? And does the EFF continue to stand by it?
I would not expect Donald Trump, based on his history with the tariff system that he almost collapsed the whole entire global economy with, and based on his postures on illegal immigration in the United States of America and his posture generally towards the media, to have any sense of sophistication or comprehension of what it means for a song to have a metaphorical meaning. I don't think he would have an appreciation of that. I do not expect him to have one. I would, however, expect the delegation that was there to appreciate the rulings of the courts of law of South Africa and be able to explain them with precise articulation that Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer is a song directed to a system of monopolizing the economy and means of production in South Africa, and therefore should not be interpreted literally. That it is actually racist to assume that black people would kill as if singing of a song constitutes an instruction. That song has been sung in numerous rallies of the economic freedom fighters. Not a single white person has died after that song has been sung. I would have expected the South African delegation to make that point much more pointedly, not for them to try to mischaracterize the president of the EFF as a rebel, try to distance themselves and state that it's not government policy. That was not the question. Their role there should have been to educate on the non-existence of white genocide, on the metaphorical meanings of the song, its implications and its historical significance. They failed to do that and kept on capitulating, and that failure is something that must be frowned upon. I agree with Lindiwe Zulu that in times of attack of this nature, we should be able to unite and protect the sovereignty and dignity of our country and the history of our liberation. But the delegation led by the president of South Africa failed to do that, which is disappointing. The EFF will continue to sing this song. We'll continue to chant it wherever we deem it fit, because it remains relevant in our context, as we still see our economy and land monopolized by a white minority, and that system must be destroyed and it must be killed.
Now, Tambo, thank you very much joining us from the Economic Freedom Fighters benches in Parliament. Prof, let me give you a chance to speak. The president is still in a room with President Trump. Is that a good signal? I think Professor Landsberg made that point, who was seated when a lady is sitting, that if that is the plan, then make no mistake, President Ramaphosa is going to capitalize on that. Is this a good sign?
It is a good sign because you needed to get the drama out of the way and get to the mission of the president in the U.S., which is how do you re-engage the United States across a wide array of issues. So I think the meeting is taking long because they have now to decide on how to return to normalcy, if we could put it that way. No trade, the financial aid and all these issues. How do we get a discussion on tariffs? And this is just going to be, I think, a beginning of a process that we're going to take a long time. But it was important that you have a discussion, a cathartic moment in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Before now, you can actually begin to talk the real business that brought the delegation to Washington. And I think the meeting, to me, went very well. Even the Oval Office, despite, I think, Lindy's point about the ongoing discussions about national reconciliation, have always been part of the equation over the last 30 years. It just looks bad for South Africa to be airing its dirty linen in the Oval Office, but it's a moment that was unavoidable because the Trump administration was determined to bring that issue. And then it was extended to other issues such as crime and so on. But I think it went very well in beginning the process of actually a relationship that is normal, that is normalized, that the shouting matches, and I think as that gentleman just mentioned, I think they are going to end. And we are going to back to a more even-handed relationship.
Prof saying the drama is over. The question now becomes, former ambassador, what now? In that working lunch, what do we need to walk out of that with?
We need to walk out with the interests of South Africa, our national agenda, which we have been pursuing for the past 31 years. And if we talk about the diplomatic and economic side of things, we need to come out with how do we strengthen the relationship between South Africa and the United States of America? How do we reverse some of the things that have happened now immediately when President Donald Trump came in? Money was removed from PEPFAR, AGOA is under threat, a whole lot of things that seem not to be going our way. That meeting is the real meeting. And we have seen, and by the way, that meeting is no longer with all the others who were like golfers and all that, under normal circumstances, under a bilateral relationship that we normally have. It would be government to government. It would be the president together with his delegation, and they will go specifically to the areas that are covered by the bilateral relations between the two countries. But of course, they speak about a reset. Why do we speak about a reset from a long-time relationship that we have had with the United States of America? It is because every time there's a new president comes in, they come in and they let us know what their focus is going to be. It's an old history. Now you have President Donald Trump who's come in and let us know that this is going to be his approach. When all is said and done, when the delegation comes back to South Africa, that's where a lot of the work is going to be done, because remember I said earlier on, even ourselves in the African National Congress, there will be a moment for us to look at that entire episode and be able to say, were we happy? Were we not happy? Because that's a good thing about being in the African National Congress. The president will come back and give that briefing to a party that he belongs to, but he didn't go there to speak from a party point of view. He went to speak there as a president of South Africa, leading a delegation from South Africa.
All right. Lindy Wezulu, as you conclude your...
President of South Africa feeling as he sits in that vehicle at the moment? Is it pride? Is it relief? Or is it satisfaction, as there is, of course, the view that that meeting seen by many as one that has gone well? Is he also considering the strength that he's portrayed and what that does really for confidence in the leadership of South Africa? I think really important reflections for the president.
Well, it is our time as well here, as in my time, and I believe Ms. Zulu and Professor Kadiagala for us to leave the stage. Naledi Molewa, I think we've kept you company.
You have indeed, and I have appreciated it. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
For the African National Congress. Thank you.
A very important moment for South Africa, and so what we'll do in this hour now is we'll get your views. You're more than welcome to send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584 in the next hour, or give us a call, 010-594-6010. What did you make of that meeting that we saw between President Donald Trump and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa?